entire time in class thinking that's easy for you to say. You're not the one who has to be all nervous here, and I bet everyone can hear when I'm swallowing or when I'm not projecting well. So all that is just to say that we're all learning together. But on the topic of organizing your speech, this is something where, like Mary Alice did, it's about how, not just the order of how you write out your speech, but kind of the words that you use. And I'm similar to you, where I like to write it out because instead of thinking it through kind of by bullet points, I like to have those thoughts down. By going to that, everyone has a different way of organizing. One second, do you mind looking?
Yes.
Baystate in Toastmasters has a really simple form that we can use as an example, and there's many more, but today we'll elaborate on this one, which goes to, I don't know if you can see it yet. It's tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. And with that, that's just a basic outline of what your speech can look like. And in developing the outline, the first part, the tell them what you're going to tell them, is the introduction of your speech. Now the introduction, on here there was a note saying how the first 2 minutes of your speech is where you captivate the audience. And that's where you keep them, you first draw them in and then you keep them in. Now your speeches were 2 minutes long, and that already felt like a long time maybe to some of you. Can you imagine having to captivate them for the first 2 minutes and then keep talking on after that? But I also heard somewhere that on YouTube or other video platforms, people have about 10 seconds to captivate an audience's attention because they can just click away. So lucky for all of us, we're all stuck here in the room together, or your audience at work or other places, and we have the benefit of keeping them there. So we don't have that pressure, but I think that's where the introduction is important to drop them in, and I'll talk more about what the introduction can look like later. And now to the tell them part, that's the body of the speech, and with that, that's the main points you want to hit, and you don't want it to be. So remember the body, the main idea and points, and that could be 1, that could be 3, but I definitely wouldn't suggest that to be 10 or 20. That they're no longer main points at that point. It's all supporting points, which goes to the next part, where the supporting materials that you have for the different ideas and the main points. The key stories, like you drew upon today, those are things that are easy to remember, and they also help the audience remember what you talked about. They could be quotations that relate to it, and all of these can help build the body of your speech. And finally, for the conclusion, it's a way to wrap up your presentation and also let people know what they're supposed to be walking away with. Remember in college how we'll have professors who seem to have no beginning or end to their thoughts, who kind of just seem to ramble on without any sort of organization, and no wonder why we sat there kind of like rocks with no expressions, because we're just trying to follow them and don't really have an idea of what's going on. So when I think of a conclusion or just the way that the speech should be organized, I think we should follow kind of a golden rule for speeches, where we should give others a speech that we ourselves would want to listen to. And I think that's a good way of figuring out how to go through this process. Now, filling out the outline of a speech, when telling a story, I always think of the ending first. I always think of why I want to give the story. But I can't really think of how to start it sometimes, and that's the process that needs to fill out. So that's the introduction, and I actually do that last, typically. So instead, what I do is do this first part, which is list out the key points. What are the main things that I want to hit on the speech? And I don't know about you, but my thoughts come in randomly, or I think of the funny parts or the best parts first, and then I'll have to think of, okay, what's really important here? So that's the next one, where you arrange them in order. And if you see, these are 2 separate things to do. You don't have to think in order right away. I think that's the benefit of having prepared beforehand. Now, impromptu speeches are different, but that's also a different topic. But they also have a similar outline, where there's an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Once you have these points, you can expand upon them, and that's the part to telling stories or quotations to kind of support each of the main ideas that you have. And in developing an introduction, think of it like shoes or clothes, not one size fits all. You can start out with either a question to the audience, or a rhetorical question, or a polling question, or you can even start out with kind of an anecdote. So I had thought of an example of, ever wonder what it feels like to lose consciousness and faint in public? Well, I've experienced that. And does that become something that you want to hear? And of course, this is not the way to start every speech, but there's many different ways, and I just listed a few as examples for what you can consider using for your next few speeches. Finally, develop a close. And this is what you want people to walk away with, kind of that one thought, that one hook that will keep them thinking about it for the rest of the night. So now that we've talked through one of the many ways to organize a speech, here's a visual way of looking through what I just talked about. So this is on mind mapping. I don't know how many of you have seen this, but it's a way to draw out your thoughts, if you will. Instead of listing it, this is kind of one way to organize those thoughts that we talked about earlier. So the main topic, you can put it in the center of a sheet of paper. I'll do this when it comes to kind of stories, or a way that I'm trying to present the summary of the research that I've done for my department. So with that, put the main topic in the middle, and you have things that you'll think of, the main ideas that will support your main topic. So these are just examples that Toastmasters gives, but if these things come up, you think, all right, these all connect to the main topic. And like a web, they all spread out, and these are just your thoughts that all connect. Now, as you're thinking through thoughts and writing them out, you may find out that they don't connect, or that there's too many and you need to pick. So I think that's just a great visual way to look through, be able to see your thoughts on paper. The next step, I don't know if you noticed, so outline is on the very right. And just as an example, the next step to mind mapping is taking one of those supporting ideas and taking it to another sheet of paper and saying, okay, for the outline, what do I need? Well, we've talked about it, where it needs an introduction, a body, and an end. And then all of these connect to the outline as well. So this is a way to kind of flesh out the different points that you're thinking through and just put it all onto a piece of paper. So with that, as you're thinking through things that don't connect to the main idea, you can put them on a separate sheet of paper and see what you want to bring in later, whether they be stories or whether they be statistics that you can use for your topic. And what you can do with these that are on the extra sheet of paper is to code them, so you can say, okay, when I get to this point, I want to use this random topic. And we can definitely go through this later if you want to know how that would look. This is just a different way how you can use to organize your thoughts. I'm a visual person, so this works really well for me, but you may be like my sister, who likes to talk things through, or she'll record herself and listen to herself later and organize her thoughts that way. So in conclusion, a well-organized speech is an effective speech for not only you, but for your audience to know what they should be walking away with. And as we've all learned tonight, each of you have something to offer, some wisdom, some knowledge, some story that we all want to hear and have really enjoyed hearing. So hopefully this topic will have helped you organize your speech, not only for the upcoming sessions of Speechcraft, but also for